Afternoon, everyone. Let's give it another 10 seconds before we start. Afternoon. Okay, people are trickling in. We'll start the call. So, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining our latest seminar of the Your Essex Community Learning series. My name's Lee. I'm in the Active Essex team, and I'm delighted to host today's seminar on the power of inclusive language and communication. Now, before I introduce my Sport for Confidence colleagues who are going to be taking us through the session today, I'll just touch on a quick little bit of housekeeping, please. So today's session, we're going to have a presentation. There'll be a chance for a kind of Q&A at the end of the presentation. I believe the chat function's open and there's also a Q&A as well. So I'll be monitoring that throughout. So please be curious and do ask some questions in the chat and we'll get them answered by the experts on our call this afternoon. The session is going to be recorded and that'll be put on our Your Essex Community YouTube channel, so you can revisit that and share it with your colleagues after today's session. And then if you're receiving this live, you'll get that follow-up email and the YouTube link and other Your Essex community resources. I just want to touch on quickly the wider Your Essex community offer. And just to share that Your Essex Community is a unified offer to support the voluntary and community sector for all organisations in Essex. The whole programme is aiming to create conditions that help charities, community groups and social enterprises thrive. It's looking to provide access to quality support across a range of different topics, and importantly too, it's about empowering the VCS to navigate challenges independently, connect with peers and strengthen their resilience. So as well as the online series, there's 3 elements to the work. So Georgia, next slide, please. Everything starts with an e-portal. So there is an online e-portal resource in Essex now, which is available for free access. On here, you'll find lots of useful tips around governance, trustee support, making decisions, safeguarding advice, volunteer law and management, and latest news that is relevant for the voluntary sector. So please do take a look at that. That's being constantly updated based on feedback and what we're hearing from the sector across Essex. The second element, next slide please, is about community participation. So this is delivered by the Active Wellbeing Society and Achieve, Thrive, Flourish across Greater Essex. There is a community of practice as part of this, so that QR code will take you to a community of practice. And what this element is about is really looking to share good practice from across the county, from a range of organisations that are sharing their learning about how they get communities involved in local action. So a great opportunity to sign up to that community of practice. And then finally, next slide, please. There is a place-based support element. So hopefully some of you on the call or listening on to this in the future will have been involved in some of the place-based support activities that are led by Active Essex and community-based partners. This is about local delivery, local training events and learning opportunities, bringing together organisations for peer support and networking. And there's lots of opportunities across the county at place level being offered right now. So please do take a look at that. There's a link on the screen there for you to take a look at what's available beyond today's session. Now back to today. I'm going to now introduce Georgia Wills and Jess Clark from Sport for Confidence, who are going to lead today's sessions. So hopefully today, and I'm sure this will be the case, but participants will gain practical, transferable skills and knowledge that supports equity, accessibility and community voice within the community sector. And this webinar is going to also broaden your understanding of the social model of disability, how systems, language and behaviours can create or dismantle barriers to participation. And Georgia and Jess are going to showcase how you can develop equitable volunteer pathways that values contribution, supports progression and reflects community diversity by building confidence and engagement, communication and power sharing across all levels. So I'm looking forward to this one. I'll pass over to you now, Georgia. Best of luck. Thank you.
Perfect, thank you. So yeah, nice to meet you. I can't see anyone, so it feels a little bit weird, but I can see that there's quite a few of you there. So thank you for having us today. So I'm Georgia, as Lee said. I'm one of the occupational therapists at Sport for Confidence. I work mainly within the learning arena space. That's kind of our workforce development arm of Sport for Confidence, where we go out. All of Sport for Confidence is about trying to break down barriers to access in physical activity in a range of places and spaces. So I work much more in that kind of workforce development arm, going out across all of the sectors and trying to break those barriers down with the people that we work with. So I'll also hand over to Jess quickly to introduce herself.
Thanks, Georgia. My name's Jess Clark and I'm a senior coach at Sport for Confidence, and I work in leisure centres in Brentwood, Basildon and Chelmsford, and I lead the coaching team, and we always talk about the power of inclusive language and communication, and it's very much a part of our practice and something that we focus on quite regularly within the learning and development for our coaching team.
Thank you. So yeah, we're going to talk today about the power of inclusive language and communication. As Jess said, it's something that's really central to all the work that we do. So we're going to talk a little bit about some things that we do and some different techniques and why it's so powerful. So there is the chat function as well, as Lee said, so please do feel free to ask questions throughout, and then we've got a drop in afterwards as well. So this bit's just a little bit about, this is our kind of learning invitation. So we just want to create a bit of a brave space. And when we say that, what we mean is challenging the ways that we think, maybe recognising that maybe we all think quite differently, and that's okay. And sometimes something might challenge ways that we've done things before or ways that we currently think, and that can feel a little bit uncomfortable. But actually, if we can all reflect and we can learn and try and think of different perspectives, don't see it that we've been doing things wrong, just see it as a brave space for learning in a way that we can continue to develop and grow individually, but also together. So it sounds like we've got a really nice range of different organisations here today, all from different backgrounds and experiences. So hopefully we can all kind of learn together.
Sorry to stop you, Georgia. I've just got a question from Marsha asking if we're going to be sharing the slides. We will be sharing the PowerPoint after.
So yes, so it will be on YouTube. I don't know, do we send the slides out normally, Lee? Sorry.
Yeah, so I'll take care of the chat function, absolutely fine. So this will be added to the YouTube channel, so everyone will have access to that, and then everyone who's here live today, they'll get a link directly to that when it's uploaded.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
So yeah, just kind of encouraging everyone to be open-minded, be kind. I think when we're thinking about quite a sensitive topic, being aware of our words. Normally we do this as much more of a kind of interactive opportunity. So I know it's slightly different today, so we won't be having as many conversations between the people that are here. But yeah, just being aware of our words and being ready to kind of think about words and to understand. So we're going to talk a little bit about what inclusive communication is, why that matters, explore a bit about how language can actually shape identity, belonging, and the access for everyone that we work with, but also ourselves. Talk a bit about some practical strategies. It will be a bit of a whistle-stop tour. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about Makaton as well, for those who haven't heard of that. So yeah, just I think reflecting first of all on a phrase that we've probably all heard a lot, particularly growing up. Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me, or names will never hurt me. We're putting a big cross to that, because actually that's not true. Words have the power to hurt people as much as they have the power to open doors and provide opportunities for people. But actually in reality, words and the words that we use can actually harm people for a lot longer than maybe a physical injury like a broken bone. So I think we all hear this a lot growing up, but actually, as I say, we're putting a stop to this phrase and thinking about the words that we use and how that can actually shape the way that people feel about themselves and the opportunities that they maybe have access to, and small phrases that we maybe use on a day-to-day basis. We just want to reflect on in some of the language. But yeah, as I say, some of the conversations might be a bit sensitive, so please take care of yourself as we talk through this, and just think about the power that language does have when we're having these conversations. So what is inclusive communication? So it doesn't only relate to a particular activity or group that we're working with. inclusive communication is really an overarching approach to a range of situations. So whether that be talking to someone on a one-to-one basis, on a more kind of personal individual level, and whether that be someone who maybe English isn't their first language, maybe they have a learning disability, maybe we're in a really busy environment and we're trying to talk to a colleague, but it's really loud and chaotic. So the more that we can be inclusive in our practice, in our communication, it's going to help in all of these different situations. But also thinking of an organisational level, so maybe when we're sending out emails, or the way that policies might be worded or articulated, or newsletters. And also thinking about population levels, so the way that maybe we communicate on social media or on our website and the accessibility of that, or different campaigns or marketing that we put out as organisations. So thinking about this communication across all of these different levels and all of the different modes, so whether that is face-to-face and verbal, whether it's written, whether it's telephone or online. So it doesn't only apply to kind of one-to-one conversations. This is very much thinking about all of those different levels and how that can be really essential, I guess, for supporting people to feel like they belong and that they have access to those opportunities, but also for safety. So by having these clear communication, it then means that we're creating safer spaces for people, for our facilities, more confidence, equality, as Lee was saying earlier about kind of equity, making sure that we all have access to as many opportunities as possible and that everyone has the right to actually engage fully, regardless of what their abilities are or what their background is. And I think as we go through, just don't be frightened to get it wrong. Sometimes certain things may feel more challenging for us as people, but we'll talk a bit about that and kind of the reflection and how to, just the power of language really. And I think just encourage you all to just take a moment just to think about maybe times that language has maybe included yourselves or made you feel excluded, or examples that you've maybe seen in places that you work or in the media. And yeah, just thinking about the power of those words, even on news, for example. I think when we think about people seeking asylum, often there's some really negative connotations and words used by the media. And actually that's then influencing the opportunities that people have access to and the opportunities and maybe the ways that other people view different people. So actually just thinking about those words and the real power that they can carry for ourselves and for the people around us and the opportunities that there are. So just thinking the fact that we all have very different experiences. Every single human will have different experiences, different perceptions, and words can really shape that as we go on. So thinking about how language can really define us, and labels that we use can become a lens, as I was just saying, kind of what words that we maybe see in the media, they then become a lens for how other people see people. Maybe how we see ourselves, and then also how we experience the world. So what opportunities we do have open to us and the doors that are open, or maybe words that close doors for people. I think one of the big things that we reflect on at Sport for Confidence is the fact that we're called Sport for Confidence. We've received a lot of feedback about that, and actually the word sport maybe actually having some quite negative connotations and some experiences for people. So we're now thinking about how we can reshape that as an organisation. That word was chosen by, sorry, I lost my voice at Christmas, it's just come back. Those words were chosen, but our kind of title was chosen by people that we work with lived experience. But now 10 years later, we're thinking about the word sport and maybe the ways that we can reshape that, because a lot of people feel that that's an automatic barrier to them when we're talking about Sport for Confidence, and hearing that word sport brings up negative experiences and negative memories. So that's something, for example, that we're reflecting on as an organisation to try and open up more doors for people. We have a very much no labels approach at Sport for Confidence. So the focus is very much on the person, and we don't reduce people to a diagnosis or choose any labels for anyone unless it's been personally chosen by themselves and they want us to use a particular label. So we very much avoid doing that to try and create more of a sense of belonging with the people that we work with and make it more like people want to take part. So the focus is on that person and what's important to them. And if they have a disability or a condition, for example, then that is a part of that person, but not the focus. And yeah, I guess just a note that it's not about being politically correct or polite. It's actually about supporting the people that we're working with. So we never intend to harm anyone. And even if there's certain terms that people disagree with, then actually, if that's what that person wants to be used and that's how they would like us to refer to them, then actually we're creating better opportunities. It's all about being kind and supporting the people that we work with. So We'll talk a little bit about some different techniques that we can use. So, for example, using some visual supports, some simplified language, maybe some more culturally appropriate and sensitive approaches. And when we're doing all of this, it's all around sending a message that everyone's voice matters, ensuring that people feel heard and that their experiences matter. So the more we can involve people in the language that we use, the better that it will be, and the more that if we put that person at the centre and understand what's important to them, that's the most important thing really, to help build trust and rapport. And I think we need to hear these words more and more. But one of the techniques that we also use is Makaton. So I don't know if anyone's heard of Makaton before, but it's different to sign language. So British Sign Language is a language in itself, and it's recognised now in the UK as a language quite recently in the last couple of years. Which is good progress. Makaton is different, so it also involves a form of sign language, but they also have symbols and different kind of techniques. Would really recommend looking into Makaton. It is a charity, and they can come out and do training with your staff, but they can come and do some training around the symbols that we can use to support people as kind of a visual reference instead of words. And also with the sign language. So this is something that we use quite a lot within our leisure centres and the people that we work with. And there's different ways then that you can incorporate this into your service to have those additional kind of visual references as we're talking, because that will help everybody. And the more that we're doing these things, the more that actually it doesn't have to be someone with a learning disability, for example, who uses Makaton. The more people that we're signing with and using these visual references, it's going to help a wider range of people. So would definitely recommend looking into Makaton for your organisation. Just some examples that I could think of. So we have hello, please, yes, thank you, no, sorry, and help. So these are some signs that I might use on a kind of day-to-day basis when I'm in a leisure centre with the people that I work with. So it might be me saying, I can help you. And the more that people recognise these signs and they understand them, the more that we're able to give people a voice and this display the point that we're trying to get across, and enabling more opportunities for people. And this is something that I think we can do within our organisations at all different levels. So that reception, for example, in a leisure centre that we work with, if they have access to some of these signs and some of this training, then it's going to open more opportunities for people. We'll talk a bit more about this in a bit. But yeah, just a few examples there. I'm not a Makaton teacher, I've just done some training, but we really recommend that people look into the signs and symbols and the programme of Makaton for your organisation. So we've spoken a little bit about exclusionary language, and I think we probably still have experiences where we do hear outdated or harmful language. I think one thing that we often think about as an organisation is if we wouldn't say something in front of a person, why would we then say it in a conversation with a colleague, for example? So one term that we might hear is like kicking off. Oh, this person kicked off last week. And actually that then has really negative connotations and is going to change the lens and the view that people have of that person. But actually, if we wouldn't say that in front of the person, we would say, oh, they found this really challenging, or this is what happened. That's how we should be communicating on a wider team and with other people. So just thinking about the impact of that exclusionary language, and if we're using some of these potentially harmful words that we don't always necessarily realise, how that's then going to shape other people's perceptions and also that person's potential perceptions of themselves. And actually that can then create barriers. So might then mean that person has limited opportunities because of the way that someone has communicated or the way that we've used labels there. We reflect on this a lot as an organisation. I think one thing that we spoke about recently was we used to have a dementia friendly swim. So we had a swimming session, but we realised, and we had feedback that a lot of people who were living with dementia didn't feel that the swimming session would be appropriate for them based off the timetable. So we changed it to dementia friendly swim in brackets at the side. But then we found that a lot of people who weren't living with dementia felt that actually this session wasn't suitable for them because they weren't living with dementia. So we then had conversations about how we can change this, and it's now called sensory friendly swim. So actually we're kind of then recognising that people may be experiencing sensory environment in a very different way, and it might not be just to one particular condition, but this session is actually suitable for people with a range of different needs and a range of kind of sensory needs, and they can then access the swimming session. And although we were trying to by saying dementia friendly swim open doors for people and encourage people who are living with dementia to come along to our swimming sessions, we were actually then excluding people in the process of doing that. So just think about some of the language that we use, I guess, whether that's helpful, whether it's unhelpful. And yeah, just one bit of an example there where hopefully you can see how then we did unintentionally put up barriers for other people. So we've then reflected on that and tried to change that, and we're constantly reflecting as an organisation, because I think we definitely need to. Language evolves, and seeking feedback is so important. Should have a sip of water. So inclusive language. Obviously, a lot of it is about being respectful, making sure that we put a person first, and really understanding what's important to that person and language that they like to be used, and terminology that's correct and current and considerate for each person. And avoiding stereotypes is so important, avoiding any assumptions, so not having an assumption based off gender or culture or identity or disability, and recognising that it's all about understanding what's important to that person, what they are able to do, and having real conversations with people around if there isn't something they can do, how we can then break those barriers down. So I think it's just a really important thing to say, kind of seeing individuals as the person that they are and not as labels. And I think sometimes in a very medical system and a country that's very focused on a medicalised system, it can be very diagnosis focused. Particular referral forms will rely on that, for example. So it's articulating things in a certain way that we're still putting that person first, but recognising maybe if they are living with a disability, and that information that might need to be included, but in a more sensitive way. And yeah, again, just recognising that we've all got very range of experiences in our identity, our abilities, and the life experiences that we've had. So trying to make places more accessible for everybody. This isn't going to just help a certain population of people. This is going to help everyone that we come across in our daily lives. It's going to help our staff. It's going to help anyone accessing our service. And I think just thinking of words, when we, as I was saying earlier, when we talk about sport, actually we find that can put up a real barrier for some people. So we now talk a lot more about movement and meaningful movement and what's important to the people that we work with. And I think a lot of people know it's good for physical health and mental health, but we'll talk a lot about joy and connection, and working with, not working for. So just thinking about this language that we can use and small words that we can maybe change within the language that we use to try and open up those doors and to try and encourage people to feel that trust within us and in our community spaces, or in the setting that we work with. So words like choice and trust, the more that we can use this positive language, the more that hopefully we can then reflect this and support everybody by using that. So I've got a short video now. I'm really hoping it works. Sorry, I feel like I'm talking very quickly, but I think we're okay for time. Hopefully, Leah and Jess, I might just have to ask you to give me a thumbs up if you can hear it.
Bartender.
Perfect. So I'm just going to play a short video. This is from World Down Syndrome Day 2024. Some of you might have seen it before. I believe it was on TV at the time. I've definitely kind of seen it around. But really interesting video just around, and I think it's around that kind of perception of thinking sometimes that someone can't do something, and like I've spoken a lot around the barriers that can then put up. So it's that shifting that can't to they can. And yeah, I'll let you watch the video. I'll stop rambling for a minute, but hopefully, where's my cursing on? There it is.
Hey bartender, you assume that I cannot drink a margarita, so you don't serve me a margarita? So I don't drink a margarita. Your assumption becomes reality. And parents, you assume that I cannot live on my own, so you don't encourage me to live on my own, so I don't live on my own. Coach, you assume that I cannot hit harder, so you don't train me to hit harder, so I don't hit harder. And teacher, you assume that I cannot learn Shakespeare, so you don't teach me Shakespeare.
Old MacDonald had a farm,
so I don't learn Shakespeare. E-I-E-I-O. But hey, if all your assumptions become reality, then assume that I can drink a margarita. So you serve me a margarita, so I drink a margarita. Assume that I can live on my own, so I live on my own. Assume that I can hit harder, so I hit harder. Assume that I can learn Shakespeare. So, what fools these mortals be? I learned fucking Shakespeare. You assume I can swear, right? Assume that I can do that job. Then I can go to parties. Then I can have sex. that I can be on stage. I assume that I can. So maybe I will.
So yeah, quite a short video, but I think I love that video. I think it just really kind of challenges that power of assumptions that we sometimes maybe make, and maybe sometimes societal's expectations on a certain population of people. I just think it's so powerful from that shifting from that can't to can, and always assume that people can until we know otherwise. And then if someone does kind of say something that they're finding difficult, that's when we work with that person to try and break those barriers down. But I think just thinking about how our words and assumptions can shape someone's experiences, and within this obviously we can see a complete life transition from that when people believe that she can't do something as to when she is able to do something, and how that's affected her whole life path. So I just think it's a really kind of short, powerful way of showing that. But I think just some kind of reflection prompts. Normally, as I say, it's much more discussion based, but just thinking about whether there's assumptions that we might unintentionally place on people, and how that might affect people's experiences, and whether there's any different changes that we can make within the environment or way that we work. So whether that be even small changes like signage or instructions, or as I say, that assumptions that maybe do exist sometimes within organisations, to try and challenge those assumptions going forward, and ensure that people can. So let me just, there we go. But yeah, really nice video. There's quite a few like that, so I recommend watching that one again if you can. And yeah, great video. This one normally does a bit of an activity, but just some words that we do sometimes hear being used nowadays, and language that should be avoided nowadays. So we do unfortunately still hear invalid or handicap sometimes when we're going out in places of work. Not saying yourselves use these, but they're words that you might still come across within work, or people's personal experiences. So obviously the correct term now would be disabled, able-bodied as well. We're now shifting towards non-disabled person. Wheelchair bound, so using the term wheelchair user. And these are pretty similar really, the reasons why. So the blind, the deaf, or a stroke victim, those words have quite negative connotations, words like bound and victim. They actually then change that lens again, the way that we might see someone. So bound and victim can sound very negative. It might sound like they don't have much independence. So it's that real shift towards language where it is a focus on that person. And actually people can still live well. So, and again, you might hear someone that has had a stroke refer to themselves as a stroke victim, and people will use language. Some people will use some quite outdated words to refer to themselves, as a form of kind of almost dark humour, but it doesn't mean that we're okay to say those, obviously. And so just thinking about the words that we use, whether there are any negative words. We've got a few here as well, like epileptic, so person with epilepsy. Disabled toilet, so referring to kind of accessible toilets now and accessible parking spaces. Again, suffers with dementia. We've tried to shift much more to living with dementia, so people can still live well with these. And it's that kind of self-fulfilling. I think sometimes when we hear words of like suffering, people that are experiencing that, then it becomes very negative. So the more that we can move away from these negative terms, and avoid these negative connotations, is going to be much more positive and inclusive. But as I say, we might still hear people use these because they might say, well, I do suffer. So we will still, and this is just where it's very important that it's every person's individual choice, and the terms that they use about themselves are very personal to them. But we don't use any labels or terms like this unless, well, we don't. So something else, sorry, I've got a lot of content to get in. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about person first versus identity first. We recommend reading a little bit more about it if it isn't something that you've come across too much. I'm sure a lot of you will have heard about this before. It can sound quite technical, but it's basically understanding what the language that matters to people. And again, this is a very personal opinion for the different people that we work with. So identity first puts the identity before a condition. So for example, a person puts the identity first. So they might say, I'm an autistic person, or I am deaf. And to them, that's because it's the fact that they do live with autism and the fact that they are deaf is very important to them as a person. So they will identify as that, and they feel it's part of their maybe pride and a sense of belonging. Other people will say, I'm a person who is deaf, or I'm a person who's autistic. And that's because to them, it emphasises the person rather than more just the diagnosis and circumstance. And they feel that's one part of their life, but that's not them as a person. So this is very personal choices. Interestingly enough, we did focus groups last year with just under 100 people. I think we had 97 people. And this is one of the things that we spoke about. And it was so varied across the board as to the language. We were critiquing an online e-learning module. So we were talking about the language and whether it should be person first or identity first. And it was so across the board. It was very varied. Lots of people would say, well, I am autistic and I'm proud, so I'm an autistic person. Lots of other people say, well, I'm a person and I live with autism, but that's not everything about me. I'm a person first. So it's very personal. It's understanding what's important to that person, something that we might hear spoken about quite a lot. And the important thing, I think, is to try and reflect that language that people use about themselves unless we know otherwise. But yeah, just recognising it is a very personal thing. And that if we do get it wrong, it's just recognising that, but being cautious of the language we use to try not to exclude any people. So following on from that, we'll talk a little bit about the social model of disability, which some of you might have heard of before. But again, we're very used to thinking of, I think as a country, thinking for a very medical model. And that can be the same sometimes when we're thinking about disability and ways that people might be disabled in their kind of day-to-day lives. So the social model of disability sees very much that it's not the person's condition that makes it difficult for someone, but actually it's the environment around them. So it's the environment that's creating those difficulties, and whether that be the physical environment or whether that be the social environment or systems or attitudes, it's that's making it hard for people to participate fully. So rather than saying, well, Dave's a wheelchair user, he can't go swimming because he's a wheelchair user, actually it's thinking about the swimming pool. It's thinking about the fact that the reason he can't go swimming is because that swimming pool isn't accessible currently for a wheelchair user. So how can we change that environment? Because that's the barrier. The barrier is that there's step access or there's no hoist. So very much thinking about the environment, for example, and how we can make those changes to support people. And it's not the condition that's the barrier. It's the environment itself, and thinking about ways that we can change that. I just encourage you to think a little bit about different barriers that people may face. So maybe if you've got a pen and paper, just jot down some ideas that you can think of, but whether they're physical things, so that might be there being steps and no ramp access, for example, or like I said, no pool pod, or a pool pod's like a lift into the water, or a hoist, or whether it be attitude, so whether there maybe are some assumptions that exist, or some exclusionary language currently, or whether that's communication related, so there's no easy read material. Something that we talk about a lot is, Jess and I were having a bit of a chat earlier actually about the fact that it can be really hard if we're doing gym plans, for example. Everything now is technology based, and even so much so that when we're using leisure centre spaces, for example, some of the systems to set an account up or to be able to access those spaces can be really inaccessible in themselves. So there might not be opportunities to have like a paper copy. Everything's digital, or it might be that there's no easy read. Or one of the things that people spoke to me a lot about during the focus groups were that actually people often speak to their support worker. So there's that assumption there that because they're there with someone supporting them, that they're then unable to communicate for themselves. So really kind of recognising those things that we maybe do, what we can do to shape those environments to create more inclusive spaces. The same with lots of places are going cashless now, which creates a massive barrier for a lot of the people that we work with. So we then spend a lot of time trying to put in place different processes for payments. But I think even the zoo recently, I've got a participant who goes to the zoo a lot, and they're now unable to buy their own cup of tea at the zoo because they've gone cashless recently. So it's all of these different things in daily lives that actually where there are barriers, and it again isn't the person's condition, but actually it's the environment that we're living with. So how we can make those changes and shift to not what's wrong with this person, but what's wrong with the environment, what's wrong with the systems, and what's wrong with what we've got in place that is not enabling people to participate fully and to gain that sense of belonging. So yeah, just something to consider. And I've just reflected about some of those different barriers. And yeah, just a bit of a summary here. Barriers are what disabled people, it's not impairments. So yeah, physical, communication, attitude, systemic, just thinking about our organisations and maybe doing a bit of an audit about things that we could maybe do slightly differently and reflecting if there is any feedback ever. So a bit of a cover to where we are at the moment. So person first versus identity first, as I said, just really making sure that it's what's important to that person, and that we're using language that reflects how that person feels and what their preferred language is. Avoiding assumptions, so not making decisions about someone before meeting them or before getting to know them and understanding, and based on their gender identity maybe, or their pronouns or abilities. It's really trying to understand what's important to that person and working with, not for, to support them in the best way possible. Trying to use plain and accessible language, so the more that we can keep our language simple, try and give short instructions. So thinking about the amount of language we give, maybe picking out what those key words are, what the key information carrying words are. If we're given instructions around a whole process of how we're going to set up for the session today, maybe it's now go to the changing room, next come to the sports hall, rather than giving loads and loads of information and then breaking it down step by step. Just as an example, but yeah, the more that we use this language, the more it's going to support everybody. Something that we talk about, and I'll come on to a little bit as well, is having visual references, so objects and stuff like that, which can be really, really helpful. Cultural sensitivity and respect. And again, speaking to people, understanding what's important for their culture, religion maybe. One thing that I was working in London, for example, in a leisure centre, and was working with some ladies who were Muslim, and had a real lack of opportunities to be able to access swimming in their environment, because often there was lots of males present, there were male lifeguards, and those opportunities weren't currently in place. So we spoke to the ladies to see how we could maybe support them to be able to access swimming, which was an occupation that a lot of ladies wanted to do. So we then worked closely with the leisure centre to kind of speak about the different things that could be put in place. So for example, we had a set swim time where it was females only. We also worked with London Sport to get access to some modesty swimwear. It was very much speaking to the leisure centre about language that they were using, and different opportunities that they could put in place. So we had funding for female lifeguards, so that girls could go and train to become lifeguards. And it's really understanding to those ladies what were important, making sure that there was a protected space for prayer, for example. So understanding, rather than me kind of coming up with ideas that I thought might be useful, speaking to the people that did have that lived experience to understand what is important and try and then make sure that's replicated, and that's what's used to be sensitive and to make those adjustments. So it might be that just a small adjustment was needed in staffing, for example, that for that set 1 hour session, as much as possible, it's a female lifeguard. But it's, yeah, as I say, talking to people, trying to understand what is important and then making those changes. A little bit more about the way that we communicate. So thinking very much about our tone, our facial expressions, our body language. So really trying to, and I'm sure a lot of you do this already, but really trying to be open with our body language, trying to smile, maybe nod along to show that understanding with people that we're working with, try and have a clear and warm, open tone. One of the things that I think we often hear is people using kind of jargon or maybe acronyms for different things, but they can then create barriers in those everyday words. So just trying to use words that are accessible to everybody. I think sometimes when we're so used to using those terms, it can become easy to forget that not everyone knows what those things are. So just trying to simplify language as much as possible. As I say, really kind of friendly and encouraging language. Trying to use objects of reference maybe. So this is something that Jess and myself and the rest of our team use quite a lot within our practice. So it might be that when someone goes to reception, we actually have a bag of objects of references there. So we can, if we're trying to communicate with someone around what activity they're coming to today, we might have a bocce ball, and we might have like one of the ribbons from dance, for example. So that then we're supporting people to be able to make those choices and have that understanding. We'll also do it in bocce, which if you haven't seen it, it's like a seated bowls game. You have a red team and a blue team. Say, for example, we're supporting someone with whether they want to be on the red team or blue team, having those balls there to actually show them, would you like to be on the red team today or the blue team today? All of these small changes that we can quite easily make can really support people. It might be having more imagery. It might be that signs themselves are more easy read versions, which are really easy to get online. but then are going to support people's independence, their autonomy, and their ability to make choices and to have those opportunities. Gestures as well can be really useful, and as I was saying earlier about Makaton, would definitely recommend looking into Makaton for the symbols and also the signs. But yeah, I think it's not all about just what we're saying, it's the way that we are saying things. So thinking about our body language, again, thinking about those kind of information carrying words, trying to simplify information as much as possible. I'm conscious I'm saying this and I'm bombarding information at you in the time, but it's something to take forward. So yeah, just thinking about the way that we kind of build that trust. Something we talk about a lot is use of self. So actually using our own personalities and also kind of recognizing people's energy levels. So if someone comes in maybe with a hood up, headphones in, and goes to the corner of the room, a big kind of bubbly approach might not be quite so suitable in that case. It might be a slow kind of graded approach into it. Whereas if we've got someone that comes in quite high energy and is up for a laugh, then maybe we would use a bit more humour in that sense, and we would adapt our approach differently. Similar to if we're encouraging participants to have a drink, I might say, I'm really thirsty, I'm going to go and get a drink. So kind of replicating that and using ourselves as a kind of therapeutic tool, really, to support our communication when we're working with people. Reflection, so important in everything that we do. So just thinking again about terms that we use. Maybe self-awareness, so challenging ourselves a little bit can be really hard, but even after today's session, maybe just spend 5 minutes just reflecting on if there's anything you'll take forward, or anything maybe that might you consider within your organisation or that you've seen around you that you might think differently. Whether it might be a small change like having the objects of reference bag or having some imagery like a picture of bocce balls, for example. I know I've used that example before. Something I remember when I was on placement in a hospital environment once, one of the professionals I was with said, "Oh, can you just come and sit on the end of the bed?" And actually for the gentleman that had been in bed for a long period of time, he had a fractured hip at the time. He said, actually, that's a really big thing for me to do. So that small word "just," that I think we use quite a lot, really upset him, and he said that it's not just something for me, like that takes a lot of effort for me. So I think sometimes just thinking about the words that we use, and small example there, but actually that's made a big difference on the way that he felt within that situation, and also his kind of feeling safe and feeling that sense of trust. Whether we can do a bit of a communication audit within your organisation, so maybe looking at policies, whether it's website communication, whether it's different signage, maybe in spaces that you work within. And where we're based a lot in leisure centres, we do have to do a lot of advocacy work for this. So kind of speaking to places to understand the importance of that. And I think, yeah, really important that we do that advocacy work in the space that we work within. As I say, ask instead of assuming, making sure we don't make those assumptions, not saying things that we wouldn't say in front of them to other people. And if we do hear exclusionary language or things that maybe aren't said nowadays, just challenging that in a really sensitive way, in a respectful way, but just saying, "Oh, actually, I think the term that's used nowadays is this," because you will get people that do use exclusionary language or language that is outdated. So just challenging that in a sensitive way and having the confidence to do that. But as I say, in that kind of sensitive way where it might just be, actually, I think nowadays this is the term that we use. Challenges and resistance. We often get people say to us, "Oh, it's so hard to keep up nowadays. I don't know, it's just words. What difference can that make?" And it's all about being PC. But actually, the main thing is that we want to support the people we work with. We want to support everyone around us. The intention is never to hurt anyone, and I think we'd all agree on that. So actually, if we are using a word and someone doesn't necessarily agree with it, it's all around being kind. So use that word. It's not going to hurt us by using a different word. So yeah, just kind of making sure that's really important to the people that we're working with, and making sure that we get that point across when we are maybe making these challenges. If you don't want to hurt someone, use that word. Other thing is just, as I say, reflecting. Sometimes we are going to make mistakes, we are going to get it wrong, but when we do, being honest about that, so apologising. "I'm really sorry I got that wrong. What can I say next time to that? What term would you prefer I use, for example?" And just trying to improve. So taking practical steps to do better next time. And inclusive language is going to be a bit of a journey. Language is always changing. As I said, as an organisation, we're always reflecting and evolving on the language that we use. So just kind of thinking about that and making sure that if we're doing a communication audit, for example, on how to be more inclusive, that we're reviewing that constantly. And the most important thing is involving the voice of lived experience. So people that we work with, involving people in those decisions and speaking to people about any barriers that maybe they experience that we can break down through language and communication. I think I'm a little bit earlier too quickly. But yeah, obviously we've just covered a little bit around what is inclusive communication, hopefully a bit about why that matters, how language does shape identity and belonging, and hopefully that's kind of come across actually the power of those words that we use and how that can really then affect the opportunities. So it can really close doors, but actually by using the positive language and language that people prefer to be used, that we can then open doors and we can encourage that sense of belonging and help to create that, because it is something that can make such a difference. And I'm sure we can all think of times where words have upset us and then maybe impacted on our lives. So thinking about this small words, as I say, hopefully some practical strategies, has been a whistle stop tour, but just thinking about those different visuals maybe that you can use, so that imagery, maybe having like a visual timetable. We often have before people come to our sessions, we might send out pictures of staff, for example, just so that people know who that familiar face is going to be when they do arrive, or at our reception maybe or entrance, we'll often have a bit of a visual timetable of what's on that day, who the staff are, visual of what the weather's like, what day it is today, and the more that we can have these objective references, I think words can go so quickly. We talk, the word's gone, but actually the more that we can have these strategies, like having visuals, that's then there for someone to refer back to. So boccia, when we're doing red team, blue team, we might have a paddle that someone's holding up so that they know which team it is at which time. And they're really small changes, but they can have a massive impact on someone's independence, their autonomy, and how they feel that they can belong in different places and spaces. And Makaton, as I say, would definitely recommend looking into that. There's some other resources as well, but they have some they can come out and do, I had some training from them this week, for example, and they can do training specific to your organisation, so around what language you maybe use and words that you use regularly, and then it's supporting the people by using these different tools. Questions and reflections we will do separately. I was just going to recommend a blog that I often read called Rewriting Social Care by Bryony Shannon, who has a background in social care, but really interesting read for anybody. Basically, she talks about words that make her go so maybe the word customer, for example, or service user can actually have quite negative connotations because it sounds very much like that power exchange and working for, not working with. So just, really interesting resource to kind of look through. She's always updating that, but would recommend going through that one. As I say, questions we'll do on a separate one. I've just got one slide here about the learning arena. So as I say, this is the workforce development arm that I'm part of for Sport for Confidence. So we do a range of different training opportunities. We also come out and do bespoke work. We work across all sectors, so health, social care, leisure, community voluntary sector, and we've got a range of different learning opportunities. So this is our online platform. I believe if you scan it, it just asks for literally email and name. But there's some different resources on there and some different courses, and then we come out and do a lot more in person. So if there's anything today that you've wanted to learn a bit more about, we've also got a couple of more opportunities booked in with Active Essex, so an Active Essex Foundation. So there'll be opportunities for you to hear more from us from the different areas. And then I think Lee's slide.
Brilliant. Georgia, Jess, just a massive thank you for going through a wealth of information there. I will open the floor to any questions in the chat that anyone wants to ask. As I said in the chat, there is a drop-in opportunity directly after this. So between 1 and 1:30, Georgia and Jess are available to answer any discrete questions you may have, or if you would like to ask the team for any advice on specific issues that you have, or just for some general advice too. So there is that opportunity, but please do make use of the next few minutes if you do have some questions right now. Georgia, I had a question. Oh, I should have said as well. So sorry, if you wouldn't mind bringing that. Yeah, if you wouldn't mind.
No.
So with all of our Your Essex Community online learning series, we do ask for some participant feedback. This helps us keep the sessions free for everyone to attend. So please do scan that QR code. It will take you to a short survey that should take you no longer than a minute or two, just to provide some feedback on today's session. So we'd really appreciate that. Georgia, I had a couple of questions actually, so I'll just give everyone just a couple of minutes to think about some questions potentially if they do.
Yep.
I want to go back to when you were talking about the dark humour. So you're saying when kind of individuals might use outdated language about themselves or negative language about themselves. How would you what would your top tips or advice be for people on the call where they might hear or see that in practice about challenging that behaviour in a positive way, I guess?
Yeah, I think it's hard because they're often doing it from a place of humour. It's their way of coping, so it can be really challenging. But one of the things that we'll often do is reflect back that isn't who they are, but in a sensitive way that's okay for them to joke about it. They also need to consider who is in the room around them. So actually by using some of these words, they can upset other people, and that has happened in the past. So it is having sensitive conversations about, we understand that's your way of coping. And that is a conversation that we have had to have, but actually for some other people in the room that can be really upsetting. So just being cautious around who you're using that language with, and yeah, I think we're just reflecting to that sometimes if they are using quite negative, it's framing that back in a positive way. So saying to people, well, that's not who you are, but also recognizing that that's their way of coping with it. But yeah, it can, as I say, kind of then affect other people in the room around them. So we do have to have sensitive conversations sometimes around just being careful about those words, because actually that we've all got different experiences, but for some people that word's really upsetting. So, but yeah, it can be a challenge, definitely.
Brilliant. Thank you. Well answered, Georgia. I do have another one as well. You talked very briefly about an inclusion communication audit, which can potentially sound scary, but also very valuable, actually. Yeah. So I just wondered kind of what does that look like for maybe Sport for Confidence, or how have you approached kind of that inclusive communication audit, or what would your advice be for other organisations who are really inspired by your talk today and think, right, I really want to do something about this, and we'll embed that into how we work on our day-to-day?
Yeah, definitely. It's on my to-do list. I'd love to kind of create something where it is, and there might be more online already, but yeah, I haven't got one off the top of my head that I could recommend. But I think just thinking about all of those different processes that are in place and the different stages of communication that you use in your organisation. So maybe going back to that individual, organisational, and kind of thinking about all of those different areas where we do use language and how we're doing that currently. So for Sport for Confidence, it very much looks, we constantly seek feedback from the people that we work with. So at all of our sessions, we have a kind of feedback box, for example, and that's easy read. So people can draw if they want to for feedback, they can write. There's a tick box. People don't have to do a tick. They can just make a mark in the area. If they want to write and draw a picture, however they want to kind of provide that feedback. If they want to speak to people, it has someone external that they can speak to, or not external, but external from that centre, for example, that they can speak to provide that feedback. And I think the more opportunities that we have for feedback for people that we work with, the more that we can hopefully break those barriers down. But it's having those in different forms. So like I say, easy read format, maybe speaking to someone and making sure that it's that kind of culture, I think, where we really open invites to that. I think that's something that we do a lot. And then based off that, so for example, like I was saying earlier about the Sport for Confidence name, and the fact that actually we're looking now at how we can develop that to move away from that barrier that maybe the word sport puts up. So that will be something, again, that's very much decided with the people that we work with, to make sure that they do feel that is appropriate and meaningful to them. But yeah, I think just I would look back at all those different levels. So, or maybe think about someone's experience. So if they're to access, I mean, everyone will know their process, I guess. So our therapy process, people would come through to single point of access, and then maybe be referred to one of our leisure centres if we were looking at our more kind of traditional model, which is within leisure centre environments. So thinking about that whole process and experience that someone that comes into your service, or before they've even come into your service. So those maybe kind of hardest to reach individuals that might not be accessing your service, thinking about the why. What are those barriers maybe before that even referral process or to access the website that are in place? So yeah, I would kind of recommend just going through that whole process initially, and then watch this space, because I'd really like to kind of create a tool that kind of goes through that process. But I think knowing your organisation, that's how I'd recommend it. Think about that participant process, and all of those different stages, and maybe where communication could be improved. So I hope that's helpful. I'm sorry I haven't got like a proper tool that I can give you yet, but
I think you articulated that beautifully, actually. Yeah, that was very clear. And I think, yeah, I've noted a few downs, and there's a few things down there and simple things to take away from that before you create your wonderful tool, of course. So excellent job. Thank you very much. So final bits from me. So I've just put the link back in there for the feedback survey. If you do have 1 or 2 minutes, we would really appreciate it. And then also is a link in the chat to the Your Essex Community Learning series. So on there, you'll find all of the links for previous sessions, and also the sessions that we've still got upcoming. So where there's a legal compliance seminar, there is a demonstrating your impact seminar, and the Sport for Confidence team are back for a lived experience leadership seminar. I don't know who in the team is delivering that one yet, Georgia.
I think it's me.
Georgia's back, so
yeah, I think I'll be back. Sorry, guys.
Georgia will be back to be talking about lived experience leadership too. So potentially a really nice follow up from today's session too. So do check that out. That's on the 15th of April, and then you can register for free on them links as well. Final word from me. So we will be in contact with you all to say when the slides are up on the YouTube channel. We'll chapter that to make that really easy to navigate through the different sections that Georgia and Jess have gone through this afternoon. And in 3 minutes time, if you'd like to come and drop in and ask Georgia or Jess some questions, you're more than welcome to, and we'll see you there. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Lee. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Thanks a lot.
Can we get a clap? Nice.
Stuff, good stuff.